Wake up, Twins Territory. It is another Tuesday night, and you are listening to Twins Hangouts, or maybe you're watching live. Thanks if you are doing that. I'm Jeremy Nygaard, joined as always by Seth Stowe. Seth, how are we doing tonight?
I'm doing tremendous. All right. How about you?
I'm doing pretty good. It's a nice little Tuesday here. Um, what we're going to talk about tonight, we're going to kind of go over some mid-season prospect rankings, and we're also going to talk about the trade deadline. Some things we'll also run through, obviously, is the minor league recap, talk about some guys in each minor league affiliation, take some questions. If you have them, you can leave those. You can send them to Seth at Seth Tweets. You can send them to me at Jeremy Nygaard. You can send them at Twins Hangouts. You could also leave them on Twins Daily. And last but not least, you could leave them on our event page, and we can answer those live. If you are going to listen for a while and miss out on the end, you can download us later on iTunes. You can also view us on YouTube. So we're all over the place if there's something that you want to hear or whatever. So, Seth, let's get right into it. This morning, you decided to update your top 10 midseason prospects. So let's
Hold up. Can we start with something else?
Wow, sure.
I mean, I'm just going to alter your schedule right up the front, right at the front.
That's fine.
I want to know how you're doing after about a week and a half of pretty much baseball every day. I mean, just kind of go through what your schedule's been the last couple of weeks because it's kind of crazy.
Well, it started on Sunday. Met you at the Futures game. It actually started that morning. We got up really early to do the color run. So we did that. I drove home. I scrubbed. I drove back. I met you. Sunday was super awesome. I mean, I talked about that on Wednesday. In hindsight, it's low stress, low key. You know, it was a fun. It was a fun day. Baseball from 2 in the afternoon until what time we leave? 11 o'clock.
10:30, 11, yeah.
So I mean, 9 hours of baseball. So that was fun. Decided not to do the home run derby, which was a great choice. It would have put me to sleep. Tuesday was the All-Star game. I talked about that on Wednesday. That was a lot of fun.
Yep.
Kind of had some time off then on Wednesday and Thursday with it being, no baseball. So I worked a little bit on the new roster and payroll page and just kind of relaxed and actually worked because I got to do that too. But Friday, my wife and I went up to the Twins game, watched a not very good offensive showing, and did the fireworks. So that was great. Got home and slept, woke up the next morning and picked up my kids because they were with my mom and brought them home and took off for Cedar Rapids. So, I mean, that was kind of a whirlwind of a few days, but also, not too crazy. Joined my older and younger brother for a little road trip down to Cedar Rapids. We took off at 10 a.m. and checked into our hotel after eating. I think we ate like in Rochester at about 3:30. Mixed up a few quick drinks. Went down to the ballpark. First person we saw was Steve Boer. So that was neat. I mean, there's a build your own burger, and I think he had just built his own burger. He wasn't working that night, so we were able to talk a little bit, and it was neat because Lewis Thorpe was pitching, and he didn't have a great game, but to see a kid that's he's like Nick Gordon's age, so to see a kid that's got the poise to do that is pretty neat. And we could talk more about that later. From there, we went to Steve's favorite place, Bushwood, which is actually funny, and I got a quick story for you. Our waitress lady, she was pretty attractive, and I said, or Steve said to me, he goes, "Well, did you hear about when Seth was down here and he tried to get a picture with the waitress?"
Oh, man.
And I said, "No, I didn't hear that story." He's like, "Well, she wouldn't take a picture with him." And I was like, "Ooh, okay." So as you know, because you got I don't know how many text messages you got, but
I got a few.
As you know, Steve, well, as you may not know, but you know that there was pictures.
I
Steve was
do.
able to use that line. We had a friend that was here, and the waitress wouldn't take a picture with him. You think you can take a picture with these guys and make him jealous? And she's like, oh yeah, I could do that. So then you
Oh,
got those pictures, and so that was fun. That evening was a lot of fun. Sunday morning was not as fun. Um, the game then was kind of a snoozer on Sunday afternoon. Not a lot of offense, and ironically, the game was only like 2 hours and 10 minutes long. So we were able to get back to our place. I think I was home before 10 o'clock. Game was done like 4:30, and um, home before 10. So I was pretty tired. Um, and then just to make the baseball weekend a little bit longer, trying to write the minor league report last night was a complete disaster. So uh, now we're here Tuesday. Things are better. Everything's good. I did hear that Kalen's leaving Fox Sports Girls, so that's kind of a Debbie Downer. But what are you gonna do? I guess.
I know that was very disappointing. I saw your tweet and I saw her response to you. So yeah, that's not good. That's unfortunate.
Yeah, but you know what? I'm guessing that she probably had this lined up a while ago and wanted to do the All Star stuff.
Well, yeah, I would want to. She was kind
So
of a star there.
yeah, so I mean, I give her a lot of credit for being smart about that. I don't know.
Yep, I agree. I don't know. I'm kind of jealous of all that. I wish I lived closer to the city sometime so I could, get down to Cedar Rapids more often, catch a few more Twins games. But what do you do?
Yeah, and I was telling you before the show, and I tweeted parts of the story out, but there was a line drive ball that just about killed. It actually would have hurt the people in front of me. If it was a foot higher, it would have hurt me. But I wasn't really paying attention. I was talking to Steve behind me, and Steve gives the old "look out," and it smacks the seat. And then Tommy Watkins jumped out of the dugout to see if everybody was okay, and I asked him if he had any underwear for me. And didn't at the time, but after the game, he offered me a pair of Nike Pro Combats, which in hindsight I probably should have taken, but I just told him that I'd go commando and everything was cool. So we got a good little chuckle out of that and enjoyed the Bushwood. It was fun. Pretty waitresses, pretty bartenders, Jameson whiskey, and that was a bad choice, but
That's not a good choice.
no, but that was not really my decision. So yeah, it was a good time, and you get to talk baseball with people that like to talk baseball, and even the taxi driver was a Twins fan, and well, in his memory, he remembers Puckett pulling Gant off the bag in the World Series, and so we all had to correct him about that one. You know, everybody's a fan, and everybody likes to talk sports, and it's good. I mean,
Yep.
it's a nice little town. We went to non-baseball related. We drove down. My brother's into like breweries, so we went to a brewery. We actually first stopped at some. It was almost like a tiki bar on Sunday morning before we could go to the game after we had to check out, and then we ended up at some brewery and got a tour of the brewery. So it's a good place, and I'm hoping that I can convince my wife that it's a place that we could head down to as a family and do some other stuff because I think there's a water park and there's some crazy mansion in Cedar Rapids, and Field of Dreams is not far away. So I don't know if we can turn it into a family trip earlier next year or not, but yeah, it's a good time, and like for people that have been to minor league baseball, it's different than Major League Baseball. You're right there, the players are right there. You can talk to the guys. It's just a different environment. It's probably more like spring training is, even though I've never been there. So, it's a good opportunity, and I think we figured out on the way back. Obviously, you drive a little bit farther, but we spent combined the three of us under $300 for gas, for tickets, for hotel. I mean, it was less than $100 a piece to do that. So, it's a good time, but let's stop talking about that and let's talk about prospects that you're ranking.
Yeah, I think we'll get more into the Cedar Rapids thing, but I was curious, how your trip went, and
Yeah, it
You
was.
know, we do talk about baseball, and your baseball trip is kind of baseball related. So,
Yeah, but let's talk about your prospects because that's why people come on here. They want to hear you talk about your new list.
well, to this point, it's not like an official list though. So it's really right now just kind of a ongoing Twitter update. You know, as the season winds down, I'll come out with more of that official top 50 list at that point, and then as those of you that listen probably know, when we come out with our prospect handbook, that will come with a top 30 list from all three of us, Jeremy, myself, and then Cody Christie
I'm gonna do
as
30.
well. Um, well, if you want
Ooh,
20, I don't remember.
I mean, you
But
usually tell
you
us.
know, that all comes after that official list comes after a lot of research and stats and scouting reports and all of that. So that's kind of the official formal one. But yeah, it's always fun to kind of keep it updated as guys have good games. Like tonight, Eddie Rosario had a big game. Um, so people will start asking, you know, where does he rank? Or, you know, right after the draft, people would say, okay, where does Nick Gordon or where does Nick Birdie rank in your prospect list? So it's kind of good to keep it updated from. Yeah, this just today, both you and I updated our personal top tens, and I think we'll discuss that here.
We should. And now you tweeted yours out, and I didn't. Um, I actually finalized my list about 2 minutes before Eddie Rosario hit his first home run tonight. If you're looking for a timeline.
Okay.
So that's the thing. Now, I guess to preface my list before we share it, I guess we could probably start at one together and just go through there. Before I start my list, I guess I looked at my preseason rankings, and I guess for me it was, has this guy improved his stock or has his stock dropped? And
Which is an interesting question, Jeremy, because his ranking may not be the exact same thing with that.
right, exactly. I had guys who I would say their stock improved, but their rating maybe didn't. But I mean
Right.
that's kind of my baseline thing. So um, I mean, we can talk about how we view the, you know, how we view that as we go through the list. But why don't we? Do we want to start at one, or do we want to start at 10? There's not a whole lot of drama at the top, I don't think. So we might as
No,
well
I
just.
think, you know, even do we can lump one and two together as they're pretty similar and talk about them. I
Yeah,
mean, I think for both of us, our number one Twins prospect is still generally the consensus, or generally the number one overall prospect, and you know, certainly no further down than two or three, and that's Byron Buxton, who did get named the Florida State League Player of the Week this week for what he did in 4 games, and now he hasn't played again in, you know, 3 or 4 games in a row, getting hit in the other wrist. But been a tough season. I think his prospect status in my mind is kind of, I mean, it can't go up, so I think it's stayed pretty flat. I mean, would you add anything more to Buxton being number one?
I would. There's a couple things. Last night before my report was lost, one of the things that I had written in there was on Buxton, and I really was curious how one gets hit on the right wrist while batting. I mean,
You know, I mean, those that are listening on iTunes won't know it, but I mean, I'm assuming what happens is you start your swing, you kind of, I don't know,
but then it's more of
somehow
a
it's going to happen.
it's more of a forearm deal, right? I
I
mean,
mean, I would think so.
yeah, when you're batting right-handed, your left hand is exposed. The hamate bone, all of that, all of the small bones are exposed to the pitch. And I don't know exactly where his was, more of a jam deal at first, so his would be a little bit lower. But I'm thinking if it's your right wrist, you're talking about the underside of your wrist, unless it was like a check swing. But it's probably more in the forearm area. I mean, without seeing it, I don't know. So I mean, that's one thing. The injury thing, I think, is something that he's going to have to shake. He's had 3 injuries, and he's played in what, less than a dozen regular season games.
Right.
So, I mean, that's he could play every game for 5 years and then get a bunch of nagging injuries, and he's going to have to answer questions about is he injury prone. So, I think that's going to be an interesting thing to watch. If he would have come back and like you said, he was player of the week, he could have really, I think, moved up to Double A soon, and people wouldn't have been calling it a wasted year. If he doesn't get to Double A, I think that's how people are going to look at this, and his rankings nationally are probably going to suffer for that. But as far as how he fits in the Twins system right now, I don't think there's any doubt that he's going to be the consensus number one when people fill out their Twins lists.
Yeah. I mean, injury prone is one of those terms that bugs me, especially with the type of injuries that you're talking about that Buxton's had, which are, diving for a ball in the outfield, sliding feet first, and then getting hit by a pitch. I mean, injury prone, I guess, is the official term for that, but it's really not. It comes across as such a negative connotation when in reality he probably couldn't have done anything about any of those. When I think of injury prone, I think of calves and hamstrings and just general soreness. And I mean, to this point, Buxton hasn't had any of those. So,
Right.
but
Right.
anyway, I mean, I think we're both on the same page here.
Yep. Yep. Number two, I think I can speak for both of us when I say Miguel Sano is the number two prospect. I'm not going to back off what I wrote in the prospect handbook last year and said that he can compete for, to break the Twin single season home run record year in and year out. And I think that when you offer 75 power, and I think that's probably where he would be power wise, that there's going to be swing and miss. You're going to fit in a corner somewhere, and if he can stick in the hardest corner to stick at third base, he's going to be in the top 10, top 15 nationally for prospects. Um, but even if he ends up at first base, he still has the bat to play. So I put Miguel Sano at number two.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't have much to add to that. We talked about previously how he's not going to play yet this season in instructional leagues, in the Arizona Fall League, and in the first part of the Dominican. And I think with him being 21, I think that's the right decision to make. I would much rather they be overly cautious with him and with Buxton than to push them too quickly through injury. But you're right. I mean, the power is going to play. He really, I think, improved his ability to lay off of those sliders last year in the outer part. Struggled with that his first couple of years. He seemed to make some adjustments. This is the part about missing a full season, though, that may hurt. It may take him a little while. I mean, it may take some time to shake some of the cobwebs at the beginning of next year. And again, that doesn't mean I think they should rush anything. It just means they need to be patient. Um, the timeline for him last year I thought was probably, May 15th to June 15th of this year. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if next year is in that same time frame. So, I mean, again, the power is the thing. We'll see how much he hits for average. That'll be probably the thing of whether he's a great player or if he's just a perennial all-star, So the strikeouts will be important to watch, but he's just got so much talent and power. It's legit. So I mean, again, honestly, there were a couple of guys that I was thinking of putting ahead of him early when I was at spring training, watching a few of the next guys we'll talk about. But at the end of the day, you can't do it. The guy's so strong, so powerful, and he's going to be just fine.
Yeah, I guess for me to add on to that is if I can have a guy that is going to impact the game every single day, I'm going to take that guy. And his power is
Yep.
going to impact the game every single day. So I'm taking him. All right. The next part I think is where it gets a little trickier. And I think we can agree on it's the 3-4-5 range. And I think we can agree on the
Yep.
guys that we're going to put in that area, and it's starting pitchers. And if you saw the national
Right.
national guys, they had these pitchers kind of jumbled together, and I kind of view it the same way. So my number three is Cole Stewart, and I put him there on the basis of if I had to take one of these guys and only one of these guys for the next 10 years, who am I taking? And it's not 100% I would take Stewart, but maybe like 40%, 45%, um, and then 20 and 30 and 20 or whatever. But I'd take Cole Stewart, not unanimously, but I would take him as my number three prospect.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how to go about this, but I mean, 3, 4, 5, as you talked about, are the same for both of us. Um, I went with J.O. Barrios at number three. I think the fact that he's now in the upper levels, and I mean, I kind of consider you got your rookie leagues of Elizabethton and the GCL, then you've got your lower levels, your A ball, so your Cedar Rapids and your Fort Myers, your A leagues, and then upper levels being Double A and Triple A. Um, he's now in that upper level. He's made 2 starts in the upper level. The first one was so-so for a debut, and his second one was tremendous. There's a lot of questions about him. I kind of, again, this is a quick one, so it's, again, subject to change 5, 8 times over the next 6 weeks of the season, of course. But I think of the three, Barrios' upside, high upside, may be the lowest of the three, but I also have to factor in other things, including path and other things you read about these guys and things people tell you, scouting reports, and also closeness to the big leagues, and that's because you had Stewart at number three, and I couldn't quite put him there, even though I believe that he has the highest upside that we're going to talk about. Honestly, I do. But he's also got the longest to go, and as much as his strikeout rate doesn't concern me at this point, we'll see where that is in a year when he goes to Fort Myers. I mean, I fully expect him to be just fine. I think his upside's the highest, but when you combine all of that, I put Barrios number three.
Right, and I agree with everything you're saying. I put Barrios at four, and part of that has to do with I was really high on Barrios right away. I think I had him number five originally, um, and he just didn't. What he did in Cedar Rapids last year didn't impress me, and I dropped him. I think I dropped him to 8. And oh boy, what what Cole Stewart did this year, what he's doing this year at Cedar Rapids, is more impressive than what Barrios did last year. So, I mean, I don't want to make that same mistake again and put too much stock into one year. But the fact that Stewart's pitching as well as he is makes me, give him the bump just based on what they did last year at comparable ages at the same level. So, I would put them as close as I possibly could, but I wouldn't argue with you if that's if you have them the other way. I mean, they're basically the same. Those two for me, those two are the same. But let's hear your number four.
I mean, I may flip flop it as we're talking here. I have actually Alex Meyer at number four, and I think as we were talking before, I think Buxton and Sano's have remained flat as far as their status. Barrios, I think, has been the riser.
Mm-hmm.
Meyer, in my opinion, has either stayed flat or even slightly down, and the reason he would be slightly down for me is because of the walk rate, which to me is at an alarming rate. That's the reason, in my opinion, aside from 40-man roster and stuff like that, that he's not in the big leagues. However, I mean, if he can figure that out, and he has in the past, so I believe he can, he's the closest to being ready, and he does have the pitches beyond just 97, 98 mile per hour fastball. He's got the slider, he's got the changeup that's still a work in progress, and he's got the curveball. I mean, he's got the pitches that scream potential ace. So I mean, you're kind of polar opposites there with Barrios being 6 foot and Meyer being 6'9", and in both cases, got a lot of history that says neither one's going to be great, and yet both of them have 4 pitches and good stuff and good makeup and all of those things. They'd like to think they're going to be the elite types, and with all three of these guys, I think we're talking about guys that are maybe not quite your Verlander number one, Verlander in his prime, or Scherzer right now, but they're right in that class of guys, as you've talked about before, the guys that you're going to feel really good about starting in a 5-game series in the playoffs. Those, 1s and 2 types of guys. And just to kind of finish this then, and we'll get to your thoughts too, I have Cole Stewart at number 5, and I do think that his prospect status has risen. I think his ability to get players out who have, a lot more baseball experience than him is encouraging. And as he eats more innings and pitches longer in the game, starting probably next year, I expect that strikeout rate to go up, and I expect him to really fly up prospect rankings. I was a little surprised when I think it was at Baseball Prospectus had him at 19. Baseball America had him at 30. I mean, these are, to me, that's almost a little bit too much for what he's done so far until you put it into the context that you and I have over the last few weeks, and that's he's playing against guys that are, really much older than him, much more experienced.
Right.
So just to summarize, I've got Barrios 3, Meyer 4, Cole Stewart 5.
And I go Stewart, Barrios, Meyer. One thing that is interesting is that if Cole Stewart would have been drafted 3 years ago before the draft deadline was when it was, he's probably signing at August 15th of last year, not making his pro debut until short season ball starts this year in, wherever they decide to put him. So, that helps guys play quicker. He was able to get that experience under his belt, cut his foot, I know, and didn't pitch a ton, but for him to get the nod, and it's kind of been the trend lately, but for him to get the nod in Cedar Rapids and to be pitching as well as he has, just it made it hard for me to say he's not a potential number one. And if that's a label that I could hang on a guy, I got to put him higher than the other guys. So, but if I could march out in a 5-game set, if I could march out, Stewart, Barrios, Meyer, or Stewart, Meyer, Barrios, I love it. I'm happy about that.
Yeah, and then throwing Gibson and whoever else you want into that mix. I think I'd like to say this too, and I probably talked about it at the time. When I was at spring training and I was watching him pitch in an intra-squad game, and then also I think against the Rays or the Red Sox in an preseason minor game. When he was pitching, everyone was watching. And I say that meaning, Alex Meyer and some of the other top prospects, the older veteran, the AAA guys, AA guys, they were over there watching. And to see his curveball, and he wasn't even throwing that slider yet at that time, which he has some now, but to see them look at each other after seeing his curveball and what it did to hitters, I mean, that was pretty encouraging. Not to mention the 95 that he throws too.
After those 5, we get into number 6. I think we both agree with number 6. For me, are you all right over there, Seth? Or is that me making these noises?
You know what? It's me, and it's those dumb audio ads. So I just killed a few sites I had up. So sorry about that.
You just had me a little confused there. I didn't know if I was watching something on my computer or what. But I'm going to close all my stuff up so that doesn't happen to me either. Moving on to number 6. I think we agree with Nick Gordon. In fact, I think that was where we put him during the draft. Now, what are you differing over there?
No, I mean, I actually think I had him a little bit lower. I think I had him closer to 8, and I have him as a guy who's risen in my mind over this time. I mean, he's hitting 300 at a level I don't think we thought he would necessarily hit in. The hit tool was the question mark coming in. I think he had another error tonight, so he's at 5 errors. He's doing fine with the glove. But what he's done hitting second, playing shortstop against guys that are much older than him, probably anywhere from 2 to 4 years older than him, I'm impressed. And you hate to just look at the draft status and such, but when you're a number 5 overall pick, I mean, looking at our top 6, I mean, Buxton was number 2, Stewart was number 4, Gordon was number 5. Some of that's because of draft status, and that's just the way it is often. But when they're able to back it up kind of starting right away, that's definitely encouraging. So, I mean, you take the pedigree, you take the stats that he's put up, which, the stats themselves are meaningless. He'd be a top 7, 8 guy if he was hitting 057 right now in Elizabethton. So, but in my mind, I've been impressed with what we've seen and heard, and the maturity and all those things that they talked about definitely seem to be true, or at least coming to fruition.
Did you know that Elizabethton Stadium, they changed some of the dimensions there recently?
I did not know that.
I just found that out over the weekend because, some of these guys that played at Cedar Rapids, that are playing at Cedar Rapids this year, played Elizabethton last year. Some of the guys that are playing at Cedar Rapids this year played Elizabethton a few years ago. And apparently they raised some walls, and it's no longer the stadium that Sano and Rosario made look so small. So I don't know how much, it's not gonna turn, doubles become doubles aren't, or home runs are now doubles, basically. But I don't know how much it changed. I heard that there's maybe 25-foot walls, so I think that's a home run. But 25-foot walls instead of like the 12-foot walls or whatever they were before. But yeah, to see Gordon at a position or at a level that we didn't expect him at, that trends upward, and to see him bat 3, whatever he's batting, also trending upward. So, yeah, I think he's in the mix with these, potentially for me in the mix with Alex Meyer, at that number 5 spot. But for me, it was too hard to differentiate the pitchers to put someone else with them.
Yeah, no, I know that's a big part of it too, and it may. I mean, obviously he's got a long ways to go. It'll be 3 years before he's close, but I mean, if he continues to do, I mean, he's on the same path. He's actually ahead of the path of Buxton.
Yeah.
He'll start next year in Cedar Rapids, and I don't expect him by any. As I did with Buxton, I expect Gordon to spend the entire 2015 year in Cedar Rapids. But, I mean, we'll see how that goes and how that plays out. I'm really curious. I mean, obviously you're going to be excited about the team's number 1 pick the following year after he's drafted, but I'm really intrigued by Gordon, based on everything we've known and heard about him. So, I mean, number 6, I'm really comfortable with where I've got him there.
Okay, I think we're going to disagree on these next 4 spots, not the next 4 people.
Well, why don't we do this? Let's go through year 7 through 10, and then I'll say where I put that guy, and we'll kind of work through there. And then at the end, we'll kind of summarize.
Okay. My number 7 now was my preseason number 5, who is pitching at a level that I didn't expect him to pitch at, and that's Lewis Thorpe. My number 8 is my preseason number 6, who's done nothing to hurt his stock, just like I feel Thorpe hasn't, except Barrios and Gordon had to, are above them, and that's Jorge Polanco. So Thorpe 7, Polanco 8. Trevor May was my preseason 10 and is my current 9. And the guy that I dropped, just because I think other guys have been better than him and had really more opportunity than him, was my preseason number 7, who's now my number 10, Eddie Rosario.
So 2 of those are the same, and 2 of them are flip-flop for me. And number 7 for me is Eddie Rosario, who I obviously is having a big night tonight, but I had made this ranking before his big night. I know he's not hitting a lot, but in my opinion, the difference between him and my number 8, which is Jorge Polanco, as it is for you, is I do believe that Rosario has more power potential. Polanco may have a little bit more speed, and obviously his ability to play shortstop will determine. He may even go up on this list if he is able to stay at shortstop. Um, I think I had Polanco at number 5 going into the season, and I think his prospect status, in my opinion, has gone up, and yet he's dropped 3 spots or 2 or 3 spots for me, which is kind of silly, but that's just kind of how I see it. So Eddie Rosario 7, Jorge Polanco 8. I had Trevor May 9th. I think I had him like 12 or something right before the season. His declining walk rate is the reason that there were concerns for me going into the season, and the improvement is the reason that I now have him in the top 10 and at number 9. I can see him being a potential number 3 starter in the big leagues with the fastball he's got, and if he can throw strikes. And number 10, I have Lewis Thorpe, which I believe is right about where I had him previously before the season, either 9 or 10, maybe even 11. Again, we talked before the show, and I don't know that I see him as, say, more than a 2 or 3. In fact, I mean, most likely probably a 3. But the fact that he is pitching a level above where I think we both think he should pitch means that you kind of have to look at that with a grain of salt. And as much as we're saying Cole Stewart's pitching against guys that are 4 to 5 years older than him and more experienced, Lewis Thorpe is from another country, and he's pitching against guys that are even 6 or 7 years older than him in some cases. So, I mean, that's why you kind of have to just take the numbers for what they are.
Yeah, absolutely. The one guy that is not in my top 10 that was at the beginning of the season is Danny Santana, and I left him out on account of probably not being a prospect. But he's another guy that I feel a lot better about now than I did in December. So, as a whole, we're talking about a farm system that was ranked number 1 or number 2 coming into the season. The top 2 guys have been hurt. Maybe one of the pitchers has lost a little bit in his stock. Everybody else has really improved their stock. So, I mean, that's a pretty promising, first 3 quarters of the year, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I think I had Santana at like 15. And, I would probably have him a little bit higher. I don't know that I'd have him in the top 10, maybe number 10. But he has been impressive in his time in the big leagues, and he's been better than he ever was at any minor league level, which means either 1, he's going to come down to earth at some point, or 2, he's just one of those guys that does perform better at the big stage and when it really matters. So the other guy I had in my top 10 previously, and I'd never had him in the top 10 really before, and I kind of, normally I would have had him probably 11 or 12, but I chose to put Josemiel Pinto, I think, at number 7 or 8, and knowing about the defensive issues, I think his status probably comes down a little bit. But at the same time, his offensive potential is still there. So if he can be a number 2 catcher and a part-time DH, which is kind of the role I thought he probably would be even, years ago, I think that's worth, even if it's gone down a little bit, that's still a pretty decent prospect. I think he's over the prospect limit. I think when I put him at number 7 or 8, the thought was, maybe it's not so bad and he'll be okay as a catcher, but I think we've learned that that's probably just not the case. So it's back to DH and backup catcher for me.
Before we move on, I was wrong. I didn't have Santana at 9. I had Gonsalves at 9.
Okay.
I know that he's not happy that he's still in E-Town, but he's not been great at E-Town. So, for me, he was 1 above May in the preseason. He's not above May anymore for me.
Right.
So he would probably drop down in that lower range. The one guy that, having watched the good Nick Birdie, he's a reliever. I hate ranking relievers because I hate relievers anyway. I mean, I don't hate relievers, but you know what I mean.
I know what you mean.
He is filthy. It's really not fair. When he's on, nobody's going to hit him.
Yep.
And it was 98, 99. I think he put 100 up on the gun once. And Steve says that you can add 2. So he may or may not have hit 102 miles an hour. And then backs it up with a 91-mile-an-hour slider that he can throw in the zone or he can throw out of the zone, then you chase and look stupid. So either you're going to miss a 102-mile-an-hour fastball that some might say is kind of flat, or look stupid trying to hit a low 90 slider. And if he's on, game over. And so having seen that Nick Birdie, I would put him number 11. If I would have saw the Nick Birdie you saw, I probably wouldn't have him number 11.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, for those that aren't aware or listening to this for the first time, I was at his Cedar Rapids debut when he walked all 4 batters he faced and was removed from the game. But even then, after seeing that, seeing the velocity, seeing the poise and maturity that he showed kind of afterwards, the confidence, you knew it wasn't going to be an issue, and it hasn't been an issue since then. So I personally would probably have him, and I was thinking about, who I'd have in that 11 to 15 range, and Birdie's name was definitely one of the top 3, maybe even 2 or 3 guys in there. So for me, he'd be in that 11 to 13 range. And I was, as we were talking about this and you were mentioning him, my first thought was this. It's in most organizations, if you have a guy like Nick Birdie, he's probably going to be like a 6-7 type of prospect. And when we're talking about him being a number, 11, 12, 13, maybe 14 prospect in the Twins organization, I mean, that's saying a lot, actually. So, the other guy, I was just looking here in the Minnesota Twins prospect handbook from last year. I did have Max Kepler at number 9. And he's just been hurt again so much this year, and he's been out of the lineup so much this year, and he hasn't been able to get into any sort of rhythm. That's 2 years in a row, so he would definitely drop out of my top 10. He'd probably be closer to 15 than he would be to 10. In fact, he might be even closer to 20 if I spent some time with it. I still believe in Max Kepler. I think a lot of people may have given up on him, and I'm curious how his 40-man roster spot will look at the end of the year, what the Twins will do with that, depending on other options and guys that have to get added, which include Miguel Sano and Eddie Rosario and Alex Meyer and a few others that may or may not be added before then. So how that's going to play out, I'm not sure, but I still believe in his swing. I believe in his maturity, and I believe in his his potential and his power potential. So I'm not. He can still play center field. He hasn't gotten, so big that he can't play center field, and he's fine in the corners and at first. So of the tools, I still believe that I don't think he'll really be an average hitter, but I think he can still be pretty good. So, and then the other guys, guys like Kenneth Vargas would certainly be in that, 11 to 16 range for me. Gonsalves for me would be still in that category. Even with the surgery, I would think that Fernando Romero and his potential, even though we probably won't see him all of next season either, it'll be interesting to see. But he could be in that same level as well. So it's pretty deep system, and I saw that I think Keith Law ranked them number 2 overall today in his team rankings.
Yep. I'm going to ask you one question about Max Kepler. Okay?
Okay.
If Max Kepler was not on the 40-man right now, do you think he would be added at the end of the season?
I would say no.
Really?
I would probably say no, because of the health. I mean, like I said, it's 2 years in a row, and the numbers aren't there to back up the fact that he wouldn't stick with the team that picked him. So I think you'd be much more safe after this season than you would have been after last season and leaving him unprotected.
Well, here's the thing with Kepler, and it probably comes out in the wash, but I mentioned before, since he was added, in after his first full season, that he would get 4 option years. So if you removed him, he still would have 2 options left. He'd get his 3 options. He wouldn't get his fourth option. You're taking a gamble if you take him off for 2015. I mean, that would be a second option year of 4, or it would be a year off of the 40 man. In 2016, you're looking at having 16 and 17 left. So I guess in my estimation, I've always kind of equated, if you're going to be a guy with that 4th year, that you get a redshirt year, and that's essentially what Kepler's had. And I personally, I would have left him in Cedar Rapids for another year. I think that would have been the best thing for him. But he did okay in the Arizona Fall League. I think that gave the Twins reason to think that he could maybe move up. He can
Yeah.
spend next year at Fort Myers again.
And he
And,
will. I mean, there's no question in my mind he'll go back there.
and I think that's perfect for him. He can spend next year there. It'll be a second option year. Don't freak out, though, because he has 2 left. He can move up to New Britain. He's going to be one of those guys that it's going to be a hard choice to make, because he's going to be, it's going to be Chris Parmelee-like, really. But if that's what Max Kepler ends up as, a guy that makes it to the major leagues, that's a pretty good investment, because a lot of guys don't. So I would leave him. I don't think that you're going to see a 40-man roster crunch where you need these spots. And when you're rebuilding, which the Twins should be doing, having a guy like Max Kepler that has upside is worth roster spot number 40 on your 40-man roster.
Yeah, and like I said, I haven't really pieced together yet what the potential offseason roster would look like. I would keep him on there unless there was some, sort of question about whether or not he would. I mean, if there was someone else. I mean, we're going to talk more here about the trade deadline and what the Twins could do there. We don't know who they'll pick up, and if they will add other guys that could be added at the end of the year. So I mean, I think right now he's a bubble guy for staying on the 40-man roster. I would understand it if they let him go, and in this case, unlike last year, I feel like he's a guy that wouldn't necessarily be able to stick, and a team wouldn't keep him on their 25-man roster the way I think they might have been willing to this year.
Yeah, I don't know that they would have been able to this year either, but
Right.
there was no harm in adding him, knowing that 4th year he'd qualify for. So that might be something to watch. Just in my little bit that I've looked, it's like they're going to have a ton of room on their 40-man, and I think he well deserves that spot. But like you mentioned, let's talk a little bit about the trade deadline. We talked about our rankings for about 39 minutes, and I think we can maybe spend half that amount of time on the trade deadline, which won't happen until after our show next week. So I'm going to work on getting a guest on to talk Twins trade deadline next week. But for now, you kind of challenged me, and I think you did the same, was to put percentages by players that, pick a player and the percent that we thought they would get traded. Right? That's what you did?
Yeah, I did that. I've got 8 guys. You said you had 8 guys. We'll see if we have any that we didn't both have, and we'll have to make up some rank or some percentages. But yeah, I'm curious how this discussion goes. And again, those of you listening, leave your feedback on Twins Daily or send us messages on Twitter. Let us know what you think about what we talk about here in terms of percentages for trade guys. We've got a series. I did a story last week, trade candidates on Kurt Suzuki, who I know we'll talk about. And I know tomorrow at Twins Daily and the next day at Twins Daily there will also be some trade candidate stories, so be sure to check those out as well. So where do you want to start?
I want you to tell me the most probable trade guy you have.
The most probable one that I have is actually Josh Willingham. And I have him at 80%, which is probably a little high. because, again, typically there aren't a lot of guys that end up getting traded, and I have four guys that I have actually over 50%, which is really unlikely. But I have Josh Willingham as my number one at 80%. I think that, he's at his age. If there's teams that want him, I think the Twins aren't really interested in bringing him back next year. Certainly not like an extension amount. I think they'll let him become a free agent, and if he's willing at that point to do a 1 year at their dollars, maybe. But I mean, I think he's a guy that won't be back next year, and if they can get something for him, I think they should. So why don't we just get your thoughts then on Willingham? Where would you put his percentage, and what are the variables there in your thought process?
I have Willingham as my second guy at 60%.
Okay.
I do have four guys over 50%. But I think you hit it on the head when you said if there is someone out there that wants him. And to be honest, if I'm Terry Ryan, I'm fielding calls for Josh Willingham. And if the best offer I get is for a player to be named later or cash, I'm doing it.
Yep.
And I don't think that's what Twins fans want to hear, that they're going to get some low-level, international pitcher or mid-level relief pitcher for Josh Willingham or cash. But I'm doing it. I'm opening left field up. I'm opening those at bats up. Hammer's not coming back, so let's move him. But I put it at 60% because I think there's a 40% chance that nobody's really going to want to give anything up for him. And I think that's too bad. But I would say 60% by the end of July, 100% chance he's gone by the end of August.
See, well, right. I think the reason I've got even 20% is that's another percentage that could change in my mind from the standpoint that there's other right-handed power hitters that could be traded. And if one of those guys gets traded to one of the teams that could be interested in Willingham, well, that takes one more team off of the list of potential teams that could be interested. So, I mean, I think Willingham's a guy that as soon as you get a decent offer that you're good with, get it done. I guess that's my opinion. So, anything more on Willingham, or do you want to jump to your number one and we'll go discuss that?
I'm going to give you my number one, and it's Kendry Morales. I have him at 70%. And
all right, I now have five guys above 50% because I didn't have him on my list. I don't know why I didn't have him on my list because he's an obvious one too.
Yeah, come on, man. So yeah, I put him at 70%. I think there'll be a team I think there'll be multiple teams willing to get him for what he has been, not necessarily what he is. And if he can be a part-time first baseman, part-time DH, switch hitting, pinch hitter for relatively no money, if I'm the Twins, offer me a prospect that I recognize the name of, and we can negotiate how much of the rest of his salary that will cover. In fact, if you're going to give me someone halfway decent, I'll cover the rest of his salary. Not me personally, but if I was the Twins, I would. I'm not interested in bringing Morales back at the end of the year. I'm not interested in bringing him back next year. But he's a guy that I think has a little more, what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe more respected throughout baseball than Willingham, and I think that he might have a little bit more value, even though at this point, he's got age on his side and Willingham doesn't. Stats, not so much. So Morales is my number one at 70%.
All right. Well, when you mentioned that, I put him at 55, which actually would put him in fourth place on my list. But I think when they signed him, they thought that. I honestly don't think they thought they were competing. I think they signed him to trade him. And I think they were hoping he would perform a little bit better so that they could get a better prospect in return. But there's teams. I mean, DH / first base. I mean, do the Angels need a DH or a guy that could spell Pujols at first base once in a while? We've seen C.J. Cron and guys like that in that role. at various times this year. I think that's an option. You could go back to Seattle. They're looking for bats. I mean, Willingham could go to Seattle. There's places that'll look for bats that have proven themselves over time. And even though he's done pretty much nothing for the Twins in 2 months, that he's got enough track record there that he could go to a team and really be a difference maker down the stretch. So it could be a player that we've heard of, but not a huge prospect, with a player to be named later to be determined after the season. That type of a thing where, if the team that he gets traded to, if he puts up some huge numbers, it could be a decent prospect. And if it's not, it may not be as big a prospect.
Let's hear your number two.
My number two is actually Kurt Suzuki. And, I know that I try not to make too much about quotes and things like that, but when Mike Biardino wrote that they're far away on contract negotiations, last week we talked, and I thought when we were on the Gleeman and the Geek show a couple weeks ago, made the comment that what the Twins typically do is try to sign guys like this, even though the right thing, in my opinion, to do is to sell high. And as you've talked about many times, try to bring him back in the offseason at a reasonable price. But you got to get something for him right now because his value is at its highest. And I think they understand that. I hope they understand that. I mean, unless they're able to sign him to a good long-term extension, meaning 2 years and whatever, I still wouldn't do it. I still think the Twins would consider it. But I think at this point, if they're not close, I'd put it at 70%. I think Suzuki goes, and I think it's for 2, if not 3 prospects, one of which may even fit into that B- category, and a couple of C type of prospects, which again, you're adding commodities, and that's what they need to be doing, even if we haven't heard all the names.
Yeah. You said not sign him to a bad long-term contract. If he signs a contract that's bad, it's going to be a bad deal. So I like Kurt Suzuki. I enjoy him as a member of the Twins. If they would have signed him to a 2-year deal in the offseason, I think maybe it would have been like, why are they signing him to a 2-year deal? Right now, he has got a steal of a deal. He's an absolute steal. But you said it. They're far apart, and his agent's not exactly known for being the most, I'm at a loss for words right now. Good dude, maybe. But I had him at 50% as my number 4, with a big fat arrow pointing up, because I think that number will increase every day as the Twins lose and as he continues to play well. I think there's a 100. If I was the Twins, there's a 100% chance I would trade him. So. Yeah. I'm hoping, and you said it, I hope they realize it. If they don't, it's going to be, there's a lot of times that the Twins do something and you scratch your head and wonder what the heck they're doing. A lot of times it's predictable. It's one of those things that, we look at it and we say, well, they shouldn't keep Jason Bartlett on the Major League roster. They shouldn't add Matt Guerrero to the 40-man. They shouldn't try to hold on to Kurt Suzuki and sign him to a long-term deal. But sometimes you just scratch your head because they do it even though you know that they shouldn't. And they have to know that they shouldn't. So, I get the people that get irritated about the stuff that's happening. And usually I can dismiss it. But when it's becoming more and more obvious that it's just not wise, it gets more and more irritating. So I'm hoping that the Twins realize it and trade Kurt Suzuki and make me think, hey, they can run a baseball team.
Yeah, I think we're both on the same page, and I think most listening probably agree. I'm just real curious what will happen. I'm not ready to put it up any higher than I've got it at 70%, and it's kind of like I hope it's that high. You'd like to think it's higher,
but the whole thing is the Twins have to get better next year. holding on to Kurt Suzuki is not going to make them better next year, right?
I would agree. When he's
So,
playing his best of his career, it's not going to get better. And frankly, I
so
don't blame his agent for going after as much as he can. He should cash in at this point. Good for him.
absolutely, absolutely. But I don't get why it's sign him to an extension. Well, no, don't sign him to an extension. If you think he's so good, pay him what he. Money's not going to be an issue with the Twins. Pay him what he deserves on the open market, but don't sign him to an extension. That's just not right. All right,
Yep.
my blood pressure's gonna go up if I keep talking about Kurt Suzuki. So let's move on. My number three is Kevin Correa, and
As is also mine.
I have him at 55%, and it's one of those. I just want someone to call and want Kevin Correa, and I think that's about a 55% chance that that actually happens. And it frustrates me because I would rather have him not starting, not taking up a spot in the rotation. But I just don't. I'm guess the 45% is because I'm not convinced anybody's going to want him.
Yeah, I have him at 60% because I think that the Twins are looking to open up spots in the next few weeks for May, for Meyer, and maybe even for Logan Darnell. I mean, just to kind of get things going a little bit. But um, I mean, he's been good. He's been more than anyone could have ever expected with the Twins. Maybe I shouldn't say he's been good. I think he's been better than we expected, which is to say he's been just slightly below league average. And if you consider that a 3 starter is league average, if he's a 4 or 5 starter, that's what he is. And I mean, he's only owed about another $2 million over the rest of the season. If I was the Twins, I'd be happy to pay the rest of that and get a C prospect. You're not going to get a lot for him, and there's a ton of pitchers that are very similar that are available. So again, it's like I said with Willingham. It's as soon as somebody says willing to give you whatever, take it.
Yep, absolutely. So you have one more guy over 50%. I don't. Can I hear who your guy is?
Yeah, I think, and it's not talked about as much as I think he should be, but I think Brian Dunston's the guy that's going to get traded, and I have him at 51%. So, I mean, it's basically 50-50. I just didn't want to put it right at 50-50 because that's boring. But 51%, so I think there's a good chance. I mean, that's, a slightly better chance that he's traded than he's not. We're talking about a left-handed reliever who has been pretty solid for about 4 years. I mean, really once he became a reliever, other than about a month stretch last year, he's been a guy you could count on. And, I mean, the names you hear, there's always lefties available, and there's always lefties that get traded to another team. He's not. I mean, he's only going to cost them maybe a $500,000 or $750,000 the rest of the year. And he's the kind of guy that can eat a bunch of innings. Whether it's two at a time or even three, or come in and get that situational spot. So I think he's actually, if you look at the guys we've talked about, I think they could get the most for Suzuki. They can get maybe a little for Willingham. I think they can get more for Dunsing than they could get for Willingham or Correa. Hopefully not Morales or Suzuki, but I think they can get more for Dunsing than I think people would think.
Yeah, I have
For
Dunston.
some reason, relief pitchers get traded at this time, and teams seem willing to give up more than they probably should.
Yeah, I have Dunsing as my number 5, but I had him down at 20%. Um, I can see exactly the point that you're making. Um, Personally, though, I thought that he could have got moved last year and didn't. So, at this point, I don't know. Um, I think Thielbar can fill the number one left-handed non-Perkins closing role admirably. Um, and Logan Darnell can do exactly what Brian Dunsing's doing now next year for a quarter of the price. So,
Or Edgar Ibarra or Aaron Thompson, or bring in your minor league free agents next off season for the league minimum, or even up to $1 million or something. And I mean, Dunsing's not going to get expensive. The thing with him is you're either going to extend him for 2 years, or you're just going to get rid of him. I think those are your options, and I don't see any reason to extend him.
Right, right, exactly. Um, the next three guys I have are all 10% or lower. So do you have anybody over 10%?
I have someone at 10%.
Who's that?
I have Casey Fiend at
Hey,
10%.
me too.
Right.
What's to say about Casey Fiend? He should have more value than he does, but he's not a closer. I don't think the Twins could get equal to his value because I think he has it, and that's why I only put it at 10%.
Yeah, I mean, he's the kind of guy that I put on the list because you have to listen. And if you get overwhelmed or whatever, you definitely listen and you probably accept it if you get a good prospect for him. You consider what the Angels got or gave up to get Houston Street, who's a solid closer, having a good year. The only difference between Fiend and Street, I mean, obviously there is more than this, but is one is a closer and one is an eighth inning guy at this point. But I mean, we've been over it many times and in many podcasts, previous podcasts and articles and all of that, the role of the closer versus the eighth inning guy. And I just think that Fiend's pretty good. So if you get something great, if not, I mean, he's arbitration eligible this coming year for the first time. So
Yeah,
keep
maybe
him.
as a Super 2, but not as a. He's not to 3 years of service. He might be a Super 2.
Yeah.
If you want to get in on the whole Fiend versus Street value of a closer versus eighth inning guy, if you scroll back to Saturday morning, I think Brandon Warren and myself and Seth had a nice little thread going of that conversation. So you can rehash that if you'd like to go back to Saturday. I have Fiend at 10. I also have one other player at 10 who, to my knowledge, has never been talked about in any trade discussion at all. Do you want to guess?
I don't know if I want to guess. I wonder if he's of the three remaining I've got.
His name is Aaron Hicks.
Oh, wow.
And I'm going to tell you why, Seth. At some point, when a guy has rubbed people the wrong way, the best thing that you can have is a change of scenery. And I would guess, I mean, I follow the Twins closer than I follow any other team, but I would guess every organization has a guy or two that could benefit from a change of scenery. And I'm not maybe actively calling and looking for a team that might need a center fielder. But if I have a GM friend that has a guy that
Knows a guy who.
has rubbed him the wrong way, and I tried to look through some teams and guys didn't even really pop up, But this is completely hypothetical. If Tampa Bay calls and says Jeremy Hellickson is just not getting it done, we know he's better than what he's shown. We feel like he's never going to do it for the Rays. And I say, hey, that's how I feel about Aaron Hicks. And then we say, hey, let's swap him. See what the heck happens. I don't know necessarily that I would do that deal because Hellickson has been god-awful. But a guy like that, you know what I mean? Prospect for prospect, or, prospect.
I like that, and I like that scenario. I remember last year I did kind of a top 8 or top 10 guys that I thought would get traded, and I included, Drew Butera in that list, and everyone, of course, thought I was crazy, and he ended up being, one of the guys traded, even though he was still at Rochester. He went on and was in the playoffs with the Dodgers, and right now I think he's still their number one catcher with the Dodgers. So, I mean, I still 100% believe in Aaron Hicks, and I think what he's done so far in Double-A is encouraging. I'd hate to see them give him up or give up on him. But in that scenario, if you can continue to grab someone who you think can be a Hellickson who has done it previously, obviously he's also got some local ties as well. You know, you'd have to listen for sure.
Right.
I'd put that in that maybe 2 or 3% range for something like that happening. But I'm glad you brought it up because I think that's one of those guys that we should talk about a little bit when it comes to the trade deadline.
Right. He's obviously rubbed the organization not the right way. So when it comes to guys like that, maybe they're better off not having them. I don't know. Just my thoughts.
Yeah.
So you must have one more guy that you have a non-zero on.
Well, I've got 3 guys, and 2 of them are one's at 1%, and 2 of them are 0.1%. So the guy that I have at 1% is Trevor Plouffe, just because of where he's at salary-wise, and there may be a team interested. And if the Twins get offered anything, not anything, but if they get offered something crazy, it's at least worth listening. I mean, 1% saying it's not going to happen, but they should listen on that. I put Brian Dozier at 0.1% because, 1, it's not going to happen. But 2, again, the team should be listening on everything, and he's the kind of guy, I think, of everyone, they could probably get the most for him. So you have to listen and then not trade him. And the other one is a guy that was written about on Twins Daily today by Andrew, and that's Glenn Perkins, and I have him at 0.1%. And, I mean, just simply put, it's not happening.
Right.
And I personally don't think it should, even though I know people know how I feel about the closer role itself, but I think there's enough there to understand why you would not trade him.
Right, and Perkins was the other guy I put on the list just for the sake of having the conversation. So I'd put him at that 0.1. You can't trade him, and that's the long and the short, is that you simply cannot trade him. He's got all the value. He could get you the biggest return, but the Twins simply cannot trade him. Not that they won't trade. I mean, they won't. They can't. They gave him he came and said, I want to finish my career as a Twin. I'll sign here for cheaper. You can't trade him, which is too bad. Maybe. I mean, I like Perkins, so it's not too bad. But it's too bad that it's the prime of his career and the Twins are lousy, and you can't even use his value to help the team. So I see no chance that Dozier's traded. And I see no chance that Plouffe's traded. I see no chance that Perkins is traded. So, whatever. What were you gonna say? You had something.
There were so many topics that came up in the forum at Twins Daily, and a lot of them are legit topics. But at the end of the day, they're not trading him, and it's not a bad thing not to trade him. He is that good. Closers typically do last longer because they don't throw much. And, some were talking about how you've got guys like Birdie or Tonkin that could take over as the closer, or Fiend. But, I mean, Birdie and Tonkin are probably going to get to the big leagues next year sometime anyway. Team them with Perkins and Fiend, and you've got 4 pretty dominant guys out there with Thielbar and whoever else is in that equation. Make game six inning games the way the Twins did in the early 2000s. The starter can give you 6 innings if you can feel like you've still got a chance to win if you got a bullpen like that. So as much as I don't focus on the bullpen, they've got some guys that I think could do the job there and be there for a long time. And if Birdie ends up taking over the closer's role, Perkins' contract is such that it wouldn't be terrible for an 8th inning guy. I mean, it's not ideal, but people were talking about when the Twins signed Hughes to a 3-year, $24 million deal that a lot were saying, well, if he ends up in the bullpen, it's not a terrible thing. Well, Perkins' contract is much more team-friendly than that, and if he ends up being an 8th inning guy instead of the 9th inning guy, his contract's not such that it's going to kill you.
Right. One other guy that we didn't mention, and it's interesting because Well, maybe it's not because he hasn't been very good. Um, Jared Burton has an option on his contract for next year with a pretty minimal buyout. So if a team is looking for bullpen help, which it seems that teams usually are, um, maybe Burton could be a guy that a team's interested in. And once you open up that can of worms, maybe somebody's interested in Deduno, maybe someone's interested in Swarzak. I guess I don't know. I can't imagine they have much, if any, value on the trade market. Um, but for me and the Twins, they're interchangeable moving pieces, and maybe not so much Deduno because I like Deduno, but um, they're moving parts that I maybe find the 40-man spot that they're attached to more valuable than the person that's attached to it.
Yeah, and again, especially depending on what you're able to get back. I mean, I think the Twins like Deduno in the role he's at. I don't mind Deduno in the role he's at. But like Burton, I mean, these are guys that they signed as minor league free agents and got good years from. I mean, Burton for the most part has been pretty good until this year, and even this year it's been about half and half of whether he's been good or whether he's been really bad. So, Swarzak's a guy I think that could be expendable because he's going to arbitration for the second year. If you can get anything for Deduno, though, I think you have to listen and you have to be pretty happy if you can get a legit prospect. And by that I mean like a B minus C plus kind of prospect, which they couldn't. But there may be teams out there that want to give Deduno an opportunity.
Okay. Let's take a kind of a step away from the deadline here, and we were going to talk about who is going to start on Saturday, and I think we've kind of, in my mind, taken a kind of a perfect segue into this conversation. Um, I think it's going to be Deduno.
I think there's zero chance that it's Deduno.
All right, so we're on opposite ends of that spectrum.
we're completely on opposite ends of that one.
Okay, tell me why.
I feel pretty confident it'll be Logan Darnell.
Okay, so does Pino go down right now?
I would think so.
And do they call Darnell up right now?
I mean, they could. As we've talked about at other times, I'd probably bring up a guy like Presley or something instead. Um, because Pino won't be able to throw for. Well, you know what? I don't know. I don't think Pino needs to go down. Of course, I didn't think Johnson needed to go down. He threw 5 innings of 2-run ball yesterday. I mean, Pino went 6 1/3 tonight and gave up just 4 runs, 3 of them in 1 inning. I think you could send down a few people, but I would probably send down, and I hate to say it, probably Colabello, but not until you need Darnell. I mean, either way, you need to call up a starter. So I think what'll happen is maybe you send Colabello down on Friday night after the game, and you call up Darnell to start on Saturday.
Okay. What did the Twins do tonight? Or what did they do last night? I didn't watch the game last night. Johnson got run out, and then who did they bring in?
I don't know. I mean, he left with a 3-1 lead, I think. 3-2 lead in the fifth after 5 innings, and then the bullpen by committee started from there. Fiend gave up a run in the eighth to tie it at 3. I think Thielbar threw. He might have thrown an inning and 2/3 or something like
Yeah,
that.
got timeouts.
Yeah, and then Fiend gave up 1, and then they went ahead in the eighth, and Perkins pitched the ninth.
So they had 4 innings to get. Well, they basically had 2 innings to put together, and they used Thielbar and Burton. Tonight,
Right.
how much did they brought Dunsing in, and then Guerrero?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Guerrero's a 40-man option guy too that could be DFA'd as well. I mean,
Which he
there's
very.
options.
So I guess my thought is you don't you're not going to call a guy from Rochester simply for the fact that you can't use all of their starters, which the Twins have now used 2 of the 6 guys that they have on their roster, 6 starters that they have on their roster. Actually, counting Pino, counting Johnson, that would be 7. So they have 5. But you call up Darnell, then they're down to 4, and then you keep sending the guy down after you use them, so they can't really use them in their rotation. Give Deduno a shot. Where the heck is Nolasco? He can pick it up at the other side of that. There's still going to be one spot, right? Because they're going to
Probably.
have to. I mean, you're not going to keep Johan Pino up and have him start Sunday. There's 2 spots in the rotation, and they can't keep filling them with the same guys as you're sending them out. So
No, I
forward with
agree. And how I see that happening is Hughes and Gibson are the givens. We both think and hope that Correa's traded within the next week, or 8 days or whatever it is. So there's a spot. Um, that could be a 40-man roster spot most likely. That could be an Alex Meyer. That could be Sean Gilmartin pitched well, the other night. I mean, at some point, yeah, Rochester is probably going to get screwed over in this whole thing, but oh well. I mean, nothing personal with all my friends in Rochester, of course, but that's what the purpose of a AAA team is. And I think you're right. I don't think they want to keep sending guys down, which is why I don't think Pino needs to go down. I wouldn't send him down. He pitched pretty well, other than the 1 inning tonight. Johnson obviously can't come back for 10 days, which is why this is a question in the first place. Trevor May's not ready. From the reports I've heard, he's not going to be ready for a couple of starts at least. And that's from people who are around him pretty frequently. Alex Meyer, I mean, you kind of got to get it on the right schedule for him to be the guy, and that might be, it's a Correa 40-man thing. Gilmartin's not on the 40-man roster. I mean, Darnell's the one guy who I think, and Terry Ryan's been very upfront the last few days saying, no, we're not moving to Duno. He is where we want him, and we feel that's the best role for him on this team. So, I mean, unless they do just a complete about face on that, which they could, give him another start, I'd just be really surprised if it's Deduno.
I'd make them. I just say, hey, we need you to make a spot start. You're doing it. Nolasco will be back the next time, and it comes around, and then you'll go back to the bullpen.
Do we even
Or
have any update on Nolasco at this point?
throwing from 150 feet, and is going to do a light bullpen. They're not sure if he'll need a rehab start. But even, I mean, maybe it's 2 starts. Maybe, hey, start twice. Let's see what we have there. And I think at this point, I mean, I'm not going to write anybody's name and pen into a bullpen next year besides Perkins. But I think they probably want Deduno around on the staff next year, or at least he has a spot that's his to lose. So if he's gonna start a game or two, let him start a game or two.
Yeah, and I mean that's the role of this I guess the long relievers. Swarzak's done it in the recent years. Dunsing's done it at times, to be the guy who comes in the second inning or third inning of a short start, or to occasionally make a spot start. So I mean it's possible they could do that. I mean my sense, and just different things. My sense is it would be Darnell. Chris Johnson will be able to start for Rochester that day. Mark Hamburger did a nice job tonight. I mean, they can make things work in the minor leagues a little easier than you can in the big leagues sometimes. Either that, or they just find a way to make it work in the minor leagues, and they just have to.
Yeah, they throw bullpen games. Speaking of Mark Hamburger, maybe we should get into our minor league update. Are we gonna try to keep this under 2 hours? What are we trying to do here?
Yeah, no, we definitely want to keep it under 2 hours.
Okay, so you're gonna give us your quick minor league update of the day?
Sure. Rochester beat Durham 4-0, and Mark Hamburger did make that start. He gave up 4 hits over 7 shutout innings. He didn't walk anybody, and he struck out 9 for the win. Ryan Presley gave up obviously no runs. He walked 1, struck out 1. Walked 1, gave up a hit, and struck out 4 over 2 scoreless innings. For the offense, Doug Bernier was 2 for 4. Josmil Pinto was 2 for 4 with a double. He's now hitting .261. I believe his on-base percentage, though, is pretty close to 400. Did Vincent Romero with his 29th double. Just to give an idea to people, they are now 56 and 48. They're in 3rd place in the International League North Division, 5 games back. However, for the wild card, there's 3 teams within 1 game of each other, and Rochester is one of those teams. So, they've got a chance.
As long as we're talking about percentages, give me a percentage that Mark Hamburger plays a Major League Baseball game this year.
I I would put it at about up in that 45% range. I
Okay.
think he'll get back up because I think he's going to keep pitching. He'll keep starting. I think his role with the Twins would probably be more as a reliever, in September. But I think if they make all the trades that I seemingly think they're going to, there'll be spots available in August and September. And I think he's a guy who's done it before. Obviously, he would need a 40-man spot. But, I would put it just shy of 50-50.
Okay. I guess I wouldn't have put it nearly that high, but you know more than I do, so we'll go with 50. Let's make it. Can you make it 51 just because 50 is boring?
No, I'm putting it at 48, 45
45.
because 50 is boring.
Okay. Fair enough. Let's move on to New Britain.
Well, I got to check out what happened in that game because we went live before it happened, but it was actually a crazy game. The Rockcats went ahead 9-5, even though they gave up 5 runs in the first inning. They went ahead 9-5 in the third. Then all of a sudden it was 9-8, and then in the ninth they gave up 2 runs and lost 10-9. So that's a tough one. Who I wouldn't be surprised if he made a start or two for Rochester. He gave up 8 runs on 13 hits in 4 innings in this game, so wouldn't get that promotion based on this game. Adrian Salcedo threw 2 scoreless innings, striking out 3. Dan Turpin, 1.2 scoreless. He had a couple runners on. Ryan O'Rourke came in and continued to dominate in the role that he's been given, which is loogie, left-handed one-out guy. He faced one batter, a left-handed hitter, and he struck him out, which is what he's been doing all year. Matt Summers did come in to try to protect the 9-8 lead, but he gave up 2 runs on 3 hits in that ninth inning as well, so not so great. Eddie Rosario, as we talked about, was the primary story. He hit his 10th double as well as his 4th and 5th home runs, and that was all by the time he had 3 at-bats. So a good game for him. Brandon Waring and Brad Boyer each had 2 hits in that game. So there's your story in that one. I wanted to point out something because when we were on that Gleeman and the Geek show, I know John had talked about the splits for Aaron Hicks so far. So I wanted to look at that 10 days later and see where he's at. Coming into this game, and in this game he was 0 for 3 with a couple of walks. He was hitting against left-handed pitching, 289 with a 391 on-base percentage and a 421 slugging percentage versus right-handed pitching, and we know that those bats have been left-handed. He's hitting 290 with a 388 on-base percentage and a 435 slugging percentage. And for those of you who didn't write all that down there, the OPSs for those are just 13 points apart. So he's doing a good job hitting both left-handed and right-handed to this side to this point. So that's certainly an encouraging thing.
Okay, percentage that Aaron Hicks makes a phone call to Terry Ryan tomorrow and says, you know what, I think I'm only going to bat left-handed from now on.
I would put that at 0.1%.
Okay, so you're saying
maybe if he's listening to this, he'll do it just to make me look bad.
You're telling me there's a chance.
There you go.
All right, let's move on to the Miracle.
All right, so we got to find out what happened there too, because again, that one was going into extra innings when we started. That ended up they won in the bottom of the 12th inning. They went to extra innings because in the 9th inning, the Miracle scored 3 runs. Tyler Grimes drove in the tying run, and they went to extra innings tied at 4. They gave up 2 runs in the 11th, but scored 2 runs in the bottom of the 11th and then won it in the 12th. Get a little idea of what happened in the offense. Tyler Grimes was 4 for 5 with 2 doubles in the game. He was playing center field again on this night. Jorge Polanco was 2 for 4 with a double and 2 walks. Mike Gonzalez 2 for 4 with a double. Obviously, we should mention too that Byron Buxton did not play in this game for the 4th straight time with the right wrist injury. Now, Ethan Mildren started. He gave up 4 runs on 6 hits and 2 walks in 6 innings, struck out 5. Todd Van Steensel struck out the side in the 7th. In the eighth, Brandon Peterson pitched a scoreless inning. Tyler Jones was struck out 3 over 2 innings. In that 11th inning, Madison Borg gave up 2 runs on 2 hits, walk, and but Stephen Gruber came in for the 12th and pitched a scoreless inning as well. So a lot of pitchers. They've had that 17-inning game earlier in this week. That was the last time Buxton played. He actually was hit by the pitch in the right wrist. His previous injury was left wrist, so it's the right wrist. He ended up playing the next 8 innings, and I'm sure once they had a long bus ride back to Fort Myers after the game, like a 4.5-hour bus ride. So I'm sure it swelled up a little at that time, and it's just kind of a day-to-day thing. So we'll be paying attention to that. As far as home runs, Dalton Hicks did hit a 2-run home run in the 11th inning. And Tyler Grimes, he's not necessarily a prototypical center fielder, but along with going 4 for 5 with a couple of doubles today, he also threw out 2 base runners and he's got a rocket for an arm. So that's encouraging. And then just to kind of finalize it, he tied it in the 9th, and he also won it in the 12th. Mike Gonzalez led off with a double. Stuart Turner sacrificed him over to third, and after a Nico Goodrum walk, Tyler Grimes singled to score Tim Shibuya, the pitcher who was running for Mike Gonzalez. So interesting game in Fort Myers. The Miracle, I believe they're now let me make sure I get this right. They're 62 and 37 on the year. They already clinched a playoff spot by winning the first half division, and I believe they were a half game behind Palm Beach in the second half as well. So again, another tremendous year here for the Miracle.
So I think if my math is right, I'm not going to double check this, but they've won more games in 2013 and 14 than the Twins have won since 2011.
I will believe you on that because it sounds
it's
realistic.
It's not true. It's not.
It's probably pretty close.
Yeah, but that's sad. They have 67 wins. The Twins might not win 67 games all year, and they play like 22 less games.
Right.
Before you move on to Cedar Rapids, just a quick thing. Brad Nelson was released from Rochester over the weekend. It looks like Lance Ray was placed on New Britain's disabled list and was replaced by Alex Wimmers, who was replaced in Fort Myers by Alex Murin. Is that how you say his name?
Yep.
Who had just made or maybe didn't make the bus trip down to Bowling Green. So he'll be joining Fort Myers. Cedar Rapids then activated Zach Larson, who had been playing a lot of right field, which is where Alex Swim has been playing during his massive hitting streak. So the outfield at bats will become even harder to come by in Cedar Rapids, who Seth is going to talk about right now.
Well, they didn't play tonight. They made that 11 or 12-hour bus ride from Cedar Rapids to Kentucky, to Bowling Green, where they'll start a series on Wednesday. In the second half, though, they're 16 and 14 and 3 games back, but just 1 game out of the playoffs. So, it's surprising with how much they struggled in the first half. They've been getting much better pitching the second half, and the hitting has been solid. You obviously didn't quite see that when you were there, but that 2-0 loss. But they've got some, I guess, I don't know if you want to call them veteran guys who have really stepped up. Chad Christensen's been good all year. Jason Kanzler had a 7-game hitting streak in which he had 6 multi-hit games and a lot of extra base hits. You mentioned Alex Swim, who in that 14-game hitting streak that recently came to an end, he hit 429. And he's hitting 340 overall since coming to the to Cedar Rapids. He had been at extended spring, and he got a couple of days with the Fort Myers Miracle when he was just promoted across basically across the parking lot, and then he finally got to Cedar Rapids, and he's just been tremendous since then. But Kanzler, Christensen, Mitch Garber had a 3-home run game the other day. I think he's got 11 or 12 now in the season. arguably the most consistent and maybe even the best hitter in the organization all year. And that includes Canis Vargas, who I think a month ago or a couple weeks ago we probably would have said was the leading candidate for minor league hitter of the year. I think at this point Garver's probably surpassed him because Vargas has done what everyone does, and that's going a little bit of a slump here. So, Brian Harr in the 2 days that in the 3 games that I saw, he had a 2 home run game and another home run. I don't know if you got to see any home runs, but I mean, he's playing well. There's some veterans on that team who are playing well, and it's really helping out, guys like Angel Vielma. I mean, there's not a lot of youth in that lineup, and they're starting to really kind of come together.
Yeah, there was no home runs hit. Um, Vilma looked good defensively. Christensen looks way more like a ball player than his draft status suggests. Way,
Absolutely. That
way.
really stood out to me.
Um, Kanzler made a couple really good plays defensively. He didn't hit much, but I mean, you could take Jason Kanzler and say, could he be Sam Fold in 4 years? And yeah, I mean, and his draft status wouldn't suggest that either. Brian Harr was a guy that had played a lot of first base at Etown last year and is playing third base. And I guess third base has been his like primary position his whole life. Just got moved off. He got moved off of the position the day before his last season. He had played third base in all fall ball and got moved off to first base when he was told, "Hey, Chris Bryant's going to be the third baseman."
Yeah,
So
that's.
he played
I'm
first
sure
base.
it was a tough pill to swallow at that time for a guy, in college who's been the man there for a long time. But kind of at this point, you got to think he's like, well, I guess that's not so bad. He's a pretty good ball player, that Chris Bryant.
Right, but it wasn't necessarily a move that was, "Hey, Chris Bryant's better defensively than you are," because he looked good at third base, and that was what I was
Yeah.
wondering about. I was like, "Wait a second, you've been a first baseman, and now you're playing third base, and Christensen's been a shortstop, and he's playing first base, and Alex Swoon's been a catcher, and he's playing right field." That's the thing that Mauer does so well is he has the guys that are so versatile that can just play anywhere. And even like Logan Wade, who played, I think he played one game at second. Um, he could play in the outfield. So when you can roll with the guys that are hitting the ball well and just kind of get them in a position, that's going to help your offense a lot. So I was really impressed with Christensen. Mitch Garver made a pretty good play defensively. Didn't do much offensively, but you can tell he's got it. Um, Har was impressive. I mean, defensively as a third baseman, um, had 3 hits again yesterday. So he just kind of lives in the shadows. He's batting like 280 something. But yeah, those three, and Swim and Kanzler, and um, J.D. Williams didn't do much, which is too bad because he's had a lot of promise, but continues to be in Cedar Rapids. So yeah, I mean it's a veteran group, and it'll be interesting to see how much they can push forward through this, these last few weeks.
Yeah, it's a very different team in Cedar Rapids this year than it was last year. Last year you had all the guys that are legit top prospect guys. Now these guys are probably most of these guys are older than the guys that are even in Fort Myers right now in many cases. But one of the things that bugs me is when people don't call them prospects because in reality these guys were drafted about 1 year and 1 month ago. The fact
Right.
that they went to college for a third year or for a fourth year in some cases, or they went to college even 3 years is one of those things that I think too many people put against them. There's guys that could be moved up, but the reality is that and just think as the Twins typically think, there's guys that they want playing a lot, and the way to do that is have them playing on different teams. And it's all going to figure itself out in the end. And some of these guys that right now in Cedar Rapids, they're not considered prospects. I would not be surprised if a few of them ended up in the big leagues, be it as a role player, just a cup of coffee, guys that just get a little opportunity, and maybe even one of them surprises everybody and becomes one of those 26, 27-year-old guys that come up and have a productive career as a fourth outfielder, as a utility infielder, as a backup catcher, a number 3 catcher on a roster, that kind of thing. So, just because they're not guys that typically show up in top 30 or top 50 prospects lists doesn't mean you shouldn't pay attention and get to know their names.
Seth, we got some minor breaking news.
All right.
Anthony Swarzak will start tomorrow. Kyle Gibson has been scratched with lower back stiffness.
Let's hope that's very minor news.
So now,
Wow.
now the staff's down to Hughes and
TBD, 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 and TBD.
TBD is gonna probably hurt his arm this week.
Well, I know. It's going to get overexposed.
So that maybe changes things Saturday because you need a guy in the bullpen now that you're gonna need a long guy, and that guy's gonna have to be Doduno.
Yeah. It might, and it's almost too bad that Ryan Presley ended up going 2 innings tonight because that's the kind of guy that you need. Now, there's probably some other guys down there that could eat a couple innings. And you know what? Guys can come back if there's an injury.
Right.
But I would assume it's got to be a disabled list type of an injury. So, I mean, Chris Johnson could be an option as well if they had to put Gibson on the DL, which at this point we don't know enough. But if he's not, that's
Right.
a moot point.
Well, I think the process that this takes is Gibson doesn't start tomorrow. So when was the last time he started?
Friday,
Now, can you
first
make
game of the break.
DL stints retro? You can't use the call-up guy because of injury and make the injury retroactive.
Correct.
That's one of those little rules. So, if you can't call up Chris Johnson to make Kyle Gibson's injury retroactive to Friday, but you could make his injury retroactive to Friday and call up someone else. If he can't make his next start, really just misses 2 starts and then he's back.
Right. Right.
What a hairy situation.
Yeah, it's not where you want to be at the trade deadline for sure. Obviously, you prefer to be a buyer at the trade deadline, but when you're a seller, you want to make sure that the guys, and obviously Gibson's not a guy they're going to trade. I mean, I'd say he's probably pretty untouchable. But yeah, I mean, you hope this isn't a very serious thing. Maybe it's a one-start thing, or maybe it's something where they have Swarzak fill in tomorrow, and maybe Gibson's ready to go by Saturday. And it just gives you a little extra time to make that decision.
That would work okay. Give us a quick update on E-Town.
E-Town tonight lost to Bluefield 7-2. Sam Gibbons, who has been pretty good, gave up 5 runs for them earned in 5 innings, 7 hits and 2 walks. Cameron Bruiser went the next 2 innings and gave up a run. He struck out 2. And then Sam Clay, actually, I think he reduced his ERA to 12.75. Giving up 1 run on 1 hit and 2 walks. He did strike out 3 in 1 inning. Jeremiah Pineda was 2 for 4 with a walk. Trey Vavra and Pat Kelly were each 2 for 4. The E-Twins are now 19 and 13. Coming into the day, they were 3 games ahead of Johnson City, who they typically do always fight for the top of their division as well. So, real quick, Nick Gordon was 0 for 4 in the game with a walk. Now hitting 306. Your guy, Max Murphy, he was 0 for 4. Now hitting 392 on the season.
Slumps. Hey.
Yeah.
Cameron Booth apparently is someone we're supposed to keep an eye on.
Because he's left-handed and throws real hard.
Yeah, I don't exactly remember what I was told. kind of foggy, but I
Yeah.
remember Cameron Boozer's name.
Yeah.
Filthy is something in the system, is what I heard.
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously, he's fairly young, and he's at Elizabethton, so it's not like he's a guy that's going to move. But when it comes to what he's got in terms of pitches and stuff, worth watching for sure.
What was it? Filthiest what? I don't remember.
I don't know. I mean, I just remember reading that he throws real hard. Maybe it was a slider or something like that, but I
Yeah, I
haven't
don't.
read much about him for a while.
Speaking of guys with filthy sliders, Tyler Starwalt had Tommy John surgery.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
I was going to ask about that. I got a list of guys I was going to ask about, but I haven't.
Confirm that, but that was the word that I got.
Okay. And earlier I made the comment about Fernando Romero and if he has surgery. At this point, I don't know. I can't confirm that he's had surgery, so I'm going to look into that too. I know he was going to go see a doctor, but I haven't heard anything really since then or what their plan is with him.
Okay. Well, if you get those injury updates, we can talk about them next week.
Yeah, we'll do that. The other
What?
thing against the GCL Twins, they were suspended in the third inning, so not much to talk about there. They're actually like 10 and 17 and 7 games back, so playoffs not real likely for that squad, I would say. I did want to touch base with you quick. I've heard mixed reports. Do you know if the Twins have signed T.J. White, their 18th round pick?
Signed.
Because I had read that, but I know on the Twins site, twinsbaseball.com, it still doesn't show him as signed. But I had heard and read that he was actually doing some rehab and stuff like that in Fort Myers. So I assume, and I remember reading it a month ago already that he had signed.
Yeah. I'll check, but I'm pretty sure he signed and is rehabbing a wrist or hand injury. So he was just signed and placed on. I don't even know if he was actually placed on a roster, but was immediately like placed on a disabled list. So I mean, you can double check on him, but I'm almost positive he signed.
Okay. The other thing, so that means the Twins did sign their first 19 picks. I believe last year they signed their first 25, if I'm not mistaken. But so 19, their first 19, I think they signed maybe 27 out of 40. So pretty good draft. I did also, and I know Doogie's tweeted it too, but the Twins also signed a non-drafted free agent, and I've been told that I will get the information the minute that he passes his physical. So as soon as that happens, but they were able to sign him, I think, on Thursday night, pending the physical. So I'm told it's one of those great stories. So I'm very intrigued by who it is. I've heard a hard thrower type, but you're always curious, why doesn't the guy get drafted? So it'll be
Maybe
interesting.
maybe he was a high school guy that wasn't gonna sign and then couldn't get the scores to get into school, so the Twins threw out their extra 220,000 at him, and boom, they got the next big thing.
I mean, that's certainly possible. There's a lot of guys that don't get drafted because they're going to school or people think they're going to go to school, and those guys are eligible to sign, right? I mean, I guess I was thinking about that. I'd never thought about it before. If a guy's eligible to be drafted but
Yeah,
doesn't get drafted, meaning he's out of high school, out of a junior college, or 3 years out of college, that player can sign, but their dollars would go towards the maximum, right?
yeah. I can't think of the Twins actually did it in the '90s with somebody. Um,
Well, they did it with Vargas several years ago.
no, I'm talking like Rich Becker time. I don't know if it was Becker. It was someone in that era that they that went undrafted, but then had a really good like showing in the Cape Cod League, and they signed him. I mean, the rules were a little bit different. I want to say the Diamondbacks 2 years ago, maybe it was the Rockies. There was a player that was a top 10 round talent that went unsigned because he was going to college. And then right before the deadline, the team threw like $400,000 at him and got him signed. So he got like sixth round money or top 10 round money, and he was undrafted.
Okay.
I mean, that just happened not last year, but I think the year before. I want to say it was the Diamondbacks that pulled that little maneuver. So it's certainly possible. Um, it's just not typically something you see. Guys, non-drafted guys sign all the time. It's just typically not, guys that had that type of, resume that you see. So, no, I'm curious to see who this guy is and uh, see where he starts his career.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, we got 7 minutes to keep this under 2 hours, and we don't have a ton of questions. I know I got one. It was from Twins Futures 24. Wondering what type of players the Twins could get in a trade for Joe Mauer and or Glenn Perkins.
Do we want to spend a minute on that or no?
Well, they're not. They can't. You can't trade Joe Mauer.
Right.
You'd have to. You'd have to pay his whole contract to get anything. So you're not getting anything for Joe Mauer. Glenn Perkins, you get guys for, but that's just not going to happen. You could get a team's number 2, number 4, number 8 prospect probably, but
Agreed.
it's not happening. So yeah, I just wanted to gloss over that one. Did you have a whole bunch of questions in your mentions?
I'll take a quick look here. I don't remember having many, but I did have some that kind of popped up since the show started. All right, so let's see. I'm just going to read this because it's a series of about 4 emails or 4 tweets to me, and I'll just read it. It's from Andrew, and I know I'm going to pronounce this wrong. It's Showweiler, something like that. I know you guys are talking prospects, but I've been thinking the past couple of days about the Twins' future. They seem to have the pitchers coming up in the minors, but I think we would need to have a leader of the staff, maybe a number 2 starter who could lead the staff. Kind of what the A's did with Samardzija. Who do you think the Twins could get to be that guy? Because I don't think it should be Hughes. Could you please talk about that on your Twins Hangouts tonight? Well, I'm a bad guy to talk about that because I don't really believe in the leadership being a huge thing. I think that happens more naturally than trying to force it. And I guess I don't see any reason why Phil Hughes can't be that guy. He's certainly not going to be as talented as Samardzija, but your leaders don't have to be your best players. It's nice if they are. And I know Joe Mauer gets beat up for not being a leader, but I think he is more than we would know publicly. But, I think Nick Punto was a leader on some of those teams that won earlier, but he's never going to get credit for that. A guy like Correa, and I don't know him. I mean, I'm saying he's like a number 4 type of a starter, a veteran. He could be a leader. So I don't think you go out trying to find a guy that's a leader. I think that happens naturally. You try to understand makeup. You try to understand the type of person the guy is. You try to get a feel for their leadership qualities and things like that. But, you can't just force guys to be something they're not. And a lot of times when you bring a guy in and put that extra pressure on them, it doesn't necessarily make it better. So I don't think leadership qualities is what the Twins staff needs. I think they just need better pitchers. And hopefully the guys that are coming up through the system at this point can be that. And that a guy like Hughes or Nolasco, who hopefully will be healthy, can be a leader for them. I think Kyle Gibson could be a guy that could be a really good leader for young pitchers. He's been through the good and he's been through the bad, and he's still working through all that right now. But within a year or two, you'd like to think he's a guy that's established himself as a quality number 3 type of a starter, and maybe he can become that as well. So I don't know. Maybe I'm kind of rambling on that, but
Well, I
I think
think
the whole leadership thing's a bit overrated.
I do too. I think Mike Pelfrey's a guy that is considered a leader. Obviously, he's not doing it right now, but
Absolutely.
the thing with sports in general, and obviously it's hard to really make any sort of claim without having been in or played in a major league clubhouse. But when you play basketball, it takes five guys.
Yeah.
And when it's a collective sport where there's five guys playing against five guys and you need everything to run really well, there needs to be leadership. When you're playing football, it's 11 on 11. I mean, very rarely is it one on one. You need to have leadership. And typically in that sport, you have designated guys. Your quarterback has to be your leader. Your middle linebacker has to be the leader, or whoever. Baseball is essentially a one-on-one game all the time.
Yep.
So if you can, or if you are a guy that answers the media's questions at the end of the night and doesn't do really stupid things like throw your bat at players on the field, that you have to have teammates, put you in your place, you're right. Leadership is overrated because you don't need that. Brian Dozier answers the questions of the media. I think that makes him a leader. He'll take responsibility if that's what he needs to do. But it's a one-on-one game, and you know who wins and who loses every at bat. There's no one to blame besides Oswaldo Arcia if he strikes out four times. He struck out four times. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I don't. Yeah, I don't know that you need. You might need a guy that every once in a while puts a guy in his place, but a vast majority of it probably has to do with the chemistry of the guys that are on your team, and if they just have the ability to get along more than it does of we need to have a leader on our team.
Yep. Yeah, and even the media thing is a bit overblown because Michael Kadire, who I do think was a good leader, was touted as a leader because he was the guy that showed up for every media event and after the games and things like that, and he did all the right things and said all the right things. Torrey Hunter was considered a leader because he was a media guy. I think some of that's definitely overrated. The fact that they're willing to talk to the media just says that they're accountable through the good and the bad, which is a good quality, but it doesn't speak to leadership. And even, having been in the clubhouse several times now, even when we're in the clubhouse, you're not seeing what's really going on behind the scenes. You're
Right.
seeing what they're showing while the media is there. We don't see what happens when the media is kicked out 45 minutes before the game or the first 10 or 15 minutes after the game. That's where your leadership shows up.
Right. No, I get all that. Um, do we have any other questions that we want to answer?
I don't have any.
I don't have any either. So wait. Did you ever get any questions from the guy that asked where to send the questions to?
Not on Twitter. Have you checked Twins Daily yet?
Yep.
I closed
Um,
that down because it was doing loud ads.
yeah, there's nothing there. So,
Now I've just got
right,
some stuff about Aaron Hicks and moving up to AAA, or Eddie Rosario and moving up to AAA. I think Hicks will at some point probably, unless he gets traded next week, like Jeremy's saying. Rosario, I think they're going to take their time with him. He's not. I mean, he had a great night tonight, but he hasn't really been doing that. He needs to do that for a little while before they move him up.
yeah, I don't. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not gonna put too much thought into if those guys are gonna move up because it's gonna be in a ripple effect and not necessarily the first domino. We have a question right now. Ash Daddy One, what is this show about? He asks. Well, Ash Daddy, we're talking Minnesota Twins baseball. Um, we do it every Tuesday night, and we answer questions and and sometimes bring people on and ask them questions, and they talk about things too. So, Ash Daddy, you are always welcome to come join us in our Twins Hangouts, 9 to well 10:30, but we usually go way longer on Tuesday nights. So thanks for hanging out. Thanks for hanging out with us a little bit on this Tuesday night. Seth, do you have anything else you want to talk about before we call it an evening?
No, I think we'll be back Tuesday night, which is a couple nights before the trade deadline. We may have to consider if the Twins are active on the deadline, maybe doing an additional show Thursday or something. But we'll kind of play that by ear and see if we have time for that kind of thing. But again, we appreciate everyone that's listening. Be sure to tell everybody. Watch it on iTunes. Subscribe, all that good stuff, and hopefully we're giving people what they want to hear, which is a lot of baseball talk, a lot of Minnesota Twins, and all their minor league affiliate talk. So hopefully it's what you want to hear. If not, let us know, and if so, let us know. Basically, let us know.
I couldn't have said it any better myself.
There
Have a
you go.
wonderful evening. We'll see you next Tuesday night.